creator is finally released, and I must say, this is probably one of my more anticipated films for the back half of the year, especially for the month of September at least. I do love when we get a new big original sci-fi film, and I think with a director like Gareth Edwards behind it, there was at least some level of anticipation for this worldwide, at least among the film community anyway. But now we've actually seen it, as I'm sure you've all seen online as well, the reactions to this film has been pretty astounding across the board, and I'm here to also agree with that group that yes, the creator is one of the best sci-fi films we've had in recent memory, and I'd maybe go as far to say that this is maybe the best original sci-fi film we've received since Blade Runner 2049. Let's just talk about Gareth Edwards for a minute. I mean, this guy, he's just had a bit of a rough run of it in the last few years, you know, making a pretty original version of Godzilla, only for it to be kind of panned across the board. Obviously, there are some fans of that movie around the world, but for the most part, that movie was kind of panned. And then for him to be essentially kicked off of Rogue One due to Lucasfilm being Lucasfilm and their tradition of booting directors from projects, he was kind of the first victim of that, really. He was booted off of Rogue One. It's a real shame, because this guy, he has talent. And this movie, I'm so glad that it's as good as it is, because it just proves that. And I have a feeling that Disney might be kicking themselves a little bit following this. But Gareth Edwards, you know, he's come out and he's done this film, and it's just got fantastic direction top to bottom. It's absolutely amazing how he's done it. This guy clearly has a clear vision and a clear understanding of what makes a sci-fi movie work. I mean, his inspirations are quite clear. He's obviously drawing from things like the original Blade Runner, 2049 as well. Akira is in there as well. Obviously, there's a little bit of Star Wars, of course. But I think that Gareth Edwards, he just has really understood what makes a good sci-fi movie, how to get people involved in it, and he's really delivered something that is quite special and something that is going to be remembered, I think, going years forward. And I think this movie's going to age like fine wine. And I think one thing Gareth Edwards is going to get a lot of attention for in this movie, as he should, is how he's able to stretch this $80 million budget. The fact that this movie was made for $80 million has really put Hollywood to shame. When you look at some films that we've received this year, big blockbusters like The Flash or Indiana Jones 5, both of which cost $300 million plus, the comparison is undeniable. You know, you look at the budget of this movie compared to them, and the fact that this movie looks 20 times better than those movies, Hollywood just needs to learn from it. Like, it's amazing, but they need to learn from this. The CGI, where used here, is barely noticeable, and that's the best type of CGI, is the CGI where you just don't see it, and that is absolutely true here. Also, the world that Gareth Edwards has created here is incredibly real and tangible, due to the fact that it's filled with real sets, real locations, the props even. Everything feels so real, it feels like it's actually a part of a physical world, unlike so many blockbusters we see these days where you can just tell it's CGI or they're using the volume tech or something like that. You can feel how fake some of these worlds feel, whereas in The Creator, every single part of this movie feels real, feels like it's actually a part of a world, and I love that. And that all comes down to Gareth Edwards' masterful use of the budget, and even down to like the designs of things. It feels how I honestly believe that our world is actually going to go. I was particularly a big fan of like the cops in this. They're kind of like these police robots, and they all have like humanoid bodies but robotic heads. And I love that because, again, it made them feel real because they move and act in a way that humans do. They just don't have a human head, which kind of gives it this uncanny valley feel, which I think really works. And I think that, again, all this just coming under an $80 million budget, it has really just showed up Hollywood for how much of a waste of money they throw at some of these movies when it's just completely unnecessary. Moving over to the performances in the film, I think that the film doesn't have a huge cast. Like, that's one thing I think that this film is going to struggle with, is drawing people into the box office, because the cast list isn't filled with like huge names. I mean, you've got John David Washington in the lead, who just continues to impress me year in, year out, no matter what he does. Like, I first saw him in BlacKkKlansman back in 2018, and then every other film he's done since then, I think he's just continued to get better and better. And I think that The Creator is probably his best performance to date, honestly. He's so good. He does have that movie star quality and that movie star charm to him, and obviously this is Denzel's kid, so he was kind of born with it in that way, but he just continues to deliver something that Denzel Washington never did. I think he delivers like more of a independent, more kind of restrained performance than what Denzel does. And that's great because he's really paving his own path as an actor, and I think that he should get more roles like this. He genuinely has a huge range of emotions that he's able to display here, and I think he's a great leading man. This film also introduces Madeline Yuda Voiles, who plays the young kid in the movie, and obviously this is her first performance. She's never been in a movie before, and she's great. I was genuinely impressed because sometimes with, kid actors in these movies, especially when they're introductions, sometimes they can come across really annoying, especially with the role that she has to play in the movie. That character easily could have come off really annoying, but she wasn't. She didn't annoy me at all. She's actually just plays a really good, compelling character. And I will also give a special shout out to Allison Janney in the movie, who plays like this kind of hard-ass cop, who is kind of like in a position above John David Washington's character. She is also just really good, just really well cast. Allison Janney's always great in these movies, and I think she did a great job here as well. Now, the story here is a little bit generic. It is a little bit familiar to what we've seen before. It kind of has elements of things like Logan and The Last of Us a little bit. It is the story of a guy having to take a young child from point A to point B. But this isn't a sci-fi setting, which is kind of something we've not seen before. And again, with the world that this was set in, it does make it feel very unique. And I think that is really important because, a story, there is only so much we can do in terms of originality with story in Hollywood these days. And I feel like that we do, with the creator, it takes a base story that we have seen before, but it's outlined with so much new stuff that is what made it stand out to me personally. And the film's just incredibly emotional and real. Like I say, even though this is kind of in this almost post-apocalyptic future sci-fi world, it still feels so close to our own world. And I also feel like that this is one of the most accurate representations of what's going to happen to us with the increased use of AI. This movie does have this kind of scare factor to it that, AI is becoming more and more powerful and more prominent in our world today. This is kind of a look into the future of what might happen with AI, and I think that's incredibly scary because AI is getting more and more scary each and every day. So to see kind of an escalation of that, it is kind of terrifying and it is very real. The movie opens with this incredible sequence that kind of shows the rise of AI through humanity and how they started off as kind of like servant robots and then it became sentient and this, that, and the other. And I think that opening sequence was really, really impressive and again, just kind of scary to show that we are in kind of a turbulent point in time in our world where AI is becoming powerful. AI is becoming prevalent, and I feel like that this film is kind of a lesson to us to kind of keep an eye on things, because things could go wrong. And I feel like we've had so many films, Blade Runner also does it as well, that shows us, what could happen if things kind of get out of hand. And that is kind of scary, and that's one thing I think this film does well. All in all, though, as I said at the beginning, I think that The Creator is one of the best sci-fi movies we've seen in recent years. I did say in my tweet review that Gareth Edwards is up there with the likes of Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve. I don't mean that in the sense that he is as good as them director-wise, because at the end of the day, Gareth Edwards does not have as big of a filmography as either Nolan or Villeneuve, so I feel like that comparison is a little bit out there. But in terms of him just as a sci-fi director and what he's able to bring cinematically to the table, I think that it is comparable to what Nolan did with Interstellar and what Villeneuve did with Blade Runner, and even Arrival as well. But also, I feel like another director that he is very similar to is Neil Blomkamp, who we spoke about recently in Gran Turismo. Obviously, Neil Blomkamp, he's kind of originally well known for doing these kind of low-budget sci-fi films, and I think that his films, they just have a very similar feel. District 9, Elysium, Chappie, those three films, they actually have a very similar kind of look and feel to The Creator. And, if you've ever seen any of those films, they have a very low budget, but they do look fantastic, and they still look good to this day because of how well made it was. And again, each of those worlds that Blomkamp created in those movies feel very real. And The Creator is very much in that same vein. It's this, very out there sci-fi world, but you can feel the connections to our world. And because of the way the CGI is done and the way that a lot of the effects are done very practically, it makes it feel like it's very real. And I feel like that, Gareth Edwards, I'm very interested to see what he does next, because I feel like Hollywood has kind of realised that perhaps they missed a step with him, and they're going to be snapping him up. And I kind of hope in a way that he kind of gives them the finger and says, no, I'm going to be doing my own thing, because, they kind of gave him a chance and they didn't trust him at the time. And I think that this is kind of him going, well, this is what you could add. So hopefully, I hope he kind of continues to go down perhaps the route of Blomkamp and Nolan and Villeneuve, and just continues to do his own thing and doesn't allow himself to get kind of swept up in the studio system, because I feel like he's too good for that. But overall, I think this is just an absolutely wonderful film that needs to be seen on the big screen. It's not doing that well at the moment in the box office, which doesn't massively surprise me. Again, it doesn't have any big names in it, but this is like a proper movie. This is like a real film, and it's amazing. Truly one of the best of the year. It's currently my number 2 in the year, just behind Mission Impossible 7. And to be honest, it could have been number 1, but I do have a special spot in my heart for Tom Cruise, of course. But I think that this is truly one of the best films of the year, and as I said, one of the best sci-fi films we've seen in a long time, and that is a big thing to say.